Are you a Christian or an atheist? Well, meet the gladiators. The Orthodox Muslim.
Can you find God contained anywhere?
Is God somewhere? Yes, God is somewhere.
Where is he?
He's above the throne, above the heavens.
Oh my God, this is so funny.
Can you refute me? So now my turn. Where is God?
It's not in space.
So it's nowhere. Can you read me the Lord's Prayer for me?
Our Father who art in heaven.
Wait. Our Father who art where?
In heaven?
God is in heaven?
Subboor Ahmed.
If atheists are the people who we should be looking up to and they are supposed to be holding up science as a banner, why didn't they come up with it? Why were the founding fathers of the fields of physics, chemistry, biology, psychology, sociology, anthropology, theists? Now, in the 20th century, when we've made so much progress, you guys have decided to come out of your caves and say, well, this is all due to us. And I'm kind of like, that's rich. That's really rich. Where were you for the last 1,000 years?
The Arena. Challenge Islam or defend your belief. Live on YouTube, Friday the 18th of April. Can you take on the challenge?
Okay, so this I think is quite unclear what you're saying here. Are you saying that by default the idea of it sounds like you're basically going down Hume's route here, that simply a miracle being a violation of the laws of nature simply by definition makes it something absurd to believe in because all we know is the laws of nature? It sounds like you've kind of taken that maxim of Hume and simply tried to turn it into a proposition relevant to the discussion about the miraculous nature of the Quran.
I'm not referring to Hume here. I'm just talking about like what's reasonable to accept in terms of a hypothesis, right? Like I would take like anything. If someone claims something to be supernatural, I don't take that to be real. I say that that's something that's just imaginary, something in their mind.
Yeah. So the reason why I brought up Hume is because you may not have realized it, but you're just simply making the same argument that he's making. You've just contextualized it for the Quran, but it's basically the same argument. The argument, in essence, is that a violation of the laws of nature is simply ruled out by the very fact that it's a violation of the laws of nature, and the laws of nature is something that we observe and they should be seen as immutable and inviolable. That's in essence what you're saying. You're just putting it in different words.
David Hume's famous argument against miracles appears in his work An Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding, 1748, particularly in section X of Miracles. It's one of the most influential skeptical arguments in philosophy of religion. Here's a clear and structured breakdown. Hume's central argument in two parts. Part 1, the weight of evidence. 1. All knowledge is based on experience, empiricism. 2. The laws of nature are established by uniform experience, repeated, consistent observations over time, e.g., water boils at 100 degrees Celsius under standard conditions. 3. A miracle is, by definition, a violation of this uniform experience. 4. Therefore, the evidence against a miracle, the law of nature, is always stronger than the evidence for it, testimony of a person. 5. So, no testimony is sufficient to establish a miracle unless the falsehood of that testimony would be even more miraculous than the miracle it tries to prove. Conclusion: no testimony is sufficient to establish a miracle unless the falsehood of the testimony would be more miraculous than the fact which it endeavors to establish.
The first thing to note is that Hume addresses effective reasoning when we are reasonable to believe in something, not absolute truth. Like me, he understands the true definition of empiricism, like I was telling you the other time. I haven't seen, this first time I've seen Hume's arguments. So I came to the same conclusions independently. So like me, he understands what I was telling you in the other video, the true definition of empiricism that comes from an ancient Greek word, empiria. So then he highlights the importance of the level of claim and how that affects epistemological weight. So let me make it more simple. That the level of claim is really important because it relates to the evidence we need to provide. So if the level of claim is more significant, we need to provide more evidence. We need to have more evidence in order to be reasonable to believe. And his conclusion is accurate. So what he concludes and says that what he says? Testimony by definition is inefficient to substantiate miracles. So testimony alone is inefficient not to justify any claim, to justify miracles. Why? Why is that? Because miracles are by definition the most improbable things. Okay, so testimony alone cannot justify miracles. Also, my argument takes this concept of Hume's, although I haven't seen, I didn't copy my argument from Hume, but my argument is better because I add another perspective, the missing link in this definition, which is the level of conviction this claim demands, and I make the argument airtight. Now no one can defeat this argument. My version, because all the limitations of his argument, you will see, are being solved by my argument. The extra factor that I include, the level of conviction its claim demands. So my argument, my effective reasoning argument, is more comprehensive, and it's in fact an exegesis. I even make an exegesis. I say that reasonable to believe equals level of claim plus level of conviction this claim demands divided by the evidence. Very comprehensive, simple. Anyway, so to recap, to conclude, so Hume's conclusion is true that testimony alone cannot be sufficient to justify the belief, to be reasonable to believe in miracles. His conclusion is true. The only thing that I disagree with his formulation. One moment, please, guys. Let me find. Just a moment. Everything will be well. Just a moment. Oh shit! Sorry, guys. Yes, I'm trying to find his argument. Sorry. Oh shit! I cannot find his argument. Yes, you have time. Don't worry. Okay. So the only premise of his argument I disagree is when he says in number 4. Therefore, the evidence against a miracle, the law of nature, is always stronger than the evidence for it. That is not true. Not always. that is true about testimony, not for all things. So his premise 4 has a problem. But his conclusion still is true.
No, I'm not making the argument. I'm just saying that we don't have any independent reasons to think that anything supernatural exists independent of our imagination.
Yeah, which is exactly Hume's argument. Hume's argument is that we observe uniformity in nature, and if we are to believe in some sort of violation, then it's something which just goes against everything we've experienced previously. My point is, okay, so I mean, whether it's Hume or whether you don't think it's linked to Hume, the point still stands. You've stated that, you've asserted that, but why is that true?
That is true because if you take my exegesis, reasonable to believe equals level of claim plus level of conviction this claim demands divided by the evidence. Miracles is a very significant claim. Testimony is not significant evidence to justify miracles. Testimony might be significant for other things, for trivial claims. Okay, or more trivial claims. What if I use my testimony and I told you, I have a car in my basement. You are reasonable to believe my testimony. Why? Because the claim that I have a car in my basement is not substantial, so you are reasonable to believe me. What if I told you I have a dragon in my basement? Just me saying that, you are not reasonable to believe me. Because now the claim I have a dragon in my basement is very substantial. Now, even if Gandhi told you I have a dragon in my basement and you believe him just because he said so, you are still gullible. It doesn't matter how reliable is the witness.
Like we don't have any scientific reasons to believe that miracles exist. I mean, I didn't say anything about violating the laws of nature. Like I'm quite happy to accept accept miracles if we have scientific
let's just stick to your wording.
Believe that.
We have no scientific justification for belief in miracles. That's your point, right?
Yeah.
Can I just say one thing? Sorry, Subboor. I don't want to ruin your train of thought. Just very, very quickly. Carlos, are you telling us why Islam is false? Or are you telling us why you believe Islam is false?
Yeah, I'm telling you why I believe Islam is false.
Oh, I don't care. Anyway, carry on, Subboor.
Okay, so let's go into this. There is no scientific justification at all for values such as kindness, saving the lives of poor people, or giving charity, or simply having any moral, ethical worldview. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So here what's happening is you've made a particular claim that there is no scientific justification for miracles, and I would completely agree with you. But that doesn't mean that miracles are irrational. It simply means science is ill-equipped to speak about miracles in the same way that science is ill-equipped to speak about its own foundations, such as the origin of logic, the origin of mathematics, and the nature of metaphysics, the nature of morality, and these types of things, the existence of numbers. So the problem here is you've slipped into some form of scientism, and that it seems you're making an argument purely based upon a epistemic filter that you've begun with, and I'm questioning that filter. I'm questioning that point. Why would we need scientific justification for miracles?
Epistemology is the philosophical discipline that seeks to identify the most efficient method to truth. So first we need a definition of what is true. So now I'm making an argument. I say, premise 1, true is something that correlates to reality. Premise 2. Reality consists of two types of things, plus an extra possibility. A. Cosmological. Cosmology comes from a Greek word cosmos that means everything that exists. And secondly, mental. What exists only in consciousness or mind, subjective experiences, examples, hallucinations, dreams, and so on. And there is a third category that I personally don't think that exists, but let's just mention it. Then there is the Platonic stuff that refers specifically to the idea that abstract entities like numbers, forms, or mathematical truths exist independently of the human mind in a non-physical realm of forms, what Plato believes. But my point is that we have two distinct things that represent different forms of reality. So, okay, so we have reality that exists in reality, and this is relevant for God. And we have the other reality that exists in our mind. If God exists only in our mind, He's not real, is He? He's not real with capital R, is He? Now, premise 3 is what I just said. For God to exist in a meaningful theological way, He exists outside human minds. Premise 4. If God exists, He must have some essence independent of human mental essence. So if God actually exists, He must have some essence to be able to separate Himself from nothing and from chaos. Okay, so otherwise he doesn't exist. Conclusion of everything I just said. The existence of God is a cosmological question. Okay, why did I make all this stuff? I made it to try to communicate to people that there are many arguments theists make that relate to mental things, not to actual reality. They confuse reality with a capital R and reality with a small r. Just because I can imagine a dragon with butterfly wings, that doesn't mean this dragon exists. So just because I can imagine in some philosophical way God exists, that doesn't mean God exists in reality. That He exists in my mind. But the God claim is a cosmological claim. This is what I demonstrated right now. Now, Subboor said that science is ill-equipped to investigate God, when in fact that's not a problem of science, that's the problem of God, demonstrating Himself. Science is just a rigorous methodological investigation of the natural world. If God exists in any form in cosmological reality, science can investigate Him. If God exists only in our mind, He doesn't really exist. So for something to exist, as I said earlier, it must have some kind of essence, no matter how counterintuitive is this essence. It must have some essence. In other words, separate itself from nothing and from chaos. But the moment you have essence, you go to cosmological reality, and the moment you go to cosmological reality, science can investigate you. It's that simple. If you are only in the mind, then you don't exist in the first place. So, we have two kinds of evidences. The first one is posteriori evidence, or as I like to call it, and Hume likes to call it, empirical evidence, and that is the truth. And then we have priori evidence, or as I like to call them, logical evidence. So let me repeat myself. So we have two types of evidences, empirical and logical evidences. Okay. Now, if you don't, Subboor, if you don't have empirical evidence, and you only have logical evidence, you already rejected half of your ability to prove God. And that is your problem. Okay. So Subboor tries to present his handicapped as science cannot investigate God because science is ill-equipped. No, my friend. If you reject empirical evidence, you just rejected half of the ways you can prove God. It's your problem. It's not science's problem. And because this video took forever, ending this video, I will disprove Allah with some kind of... I already made the argument. It's called the Epistemic Incompatibility of Quranic certainty. I make the arguments, and after a couple of seconds, I forgot what I wrote. And, of course, at the end we have an ending song that I will sing. Thank you.
The Epistemic Incompatibility of Quranic Certainty. Premise 1. Human knowledge concerning metaphysical or divine matters is inherently uncertain, except in the case of logical tautologies, e.g., A = A, or immediate self-awareness, e.g., I think, therefore I am. Premise 2. The Quran asserts that it provides conclusive proof, hujja baligha, of divine truths and claims that believers can attain certainty, yaqeen, through its message and revelation. O mankind, there has come to you a conclusive proof from your Lord, and we have sent down to you a clear light. This is the book about which there is no doubt. Of the hereafter, they are certain. Worship your Lord until certainty comes to you. Premise 3. However, such certainty is not attainable through reason alone or empirical evidence, as affirmed even within Islamic theology itself, e.g., divine hiddenness, the test-like nature of life, and human cognitive limitations. Conclusion. Therefore, the Quran's claim to offer conclusive, objective certainty about divine truths is epistemically unjustified and internally inconsistent when measured against the very conditions of human knowledge and the Quran's own portrayal of hiddenness. This undermines its claim to be a universally binding proof.
Are you a Christian or an atheist? Well, meet the gladiators.
Λονδίνο, Άμστερνταμ ή Βερολίνο. Έχεις και χάσει το ακριβώς εμείς να πας. Όσο και αν χοντράνει κάποια δεν σου δίνω. Να κάνεις λόγες με το κάτσο πας. Όσα κι αν χοντράνει κάποια δεν σου δίνω. Να κάνεις λόγες με το magic πας. Ταξιδιά η ψυχή
θέλω δίπλα σου είναι δύσκολο να μένω. Καιρός να βρω τη δικιά μου ζωή. Σ' αυτό το ταξίδι δεν θα σε περιμένω. Βράδυ, ό,τι έχω μέσα μου για σένα θα το σβήσω. Είναι μονόδρομος ο δρόμος που έχεις πάρει και δεν σε βλέπω να γυρίσεις πίσω. Είναι μονόδρομος ο δρόμος που έχεις πάρει και δεν σε βλέπω να γυρίσεις πίσω. Ταξιδιάνα ψυχή και αν θέλω δίπλα σου είναι δύσκολο να μένω. Καιρός να βρω τη δικιά μου ζωή. Σ' αυτό το ταξίδι δεν θα σε περιμένω. Λονδίνο, Άμστερνταμ ή Βερολίνο. Έχεις ξεχάσει που ακριβώς θέλεις να πας. Όσα κι αν έχω δανεικά πια να σου δίνω. Να κάνεις βόλτες με το Magic Bus. Όσα κι αν έχω δανεικά πια να σου δίνω. Να κάνεις βόλτες με το Magic Bus. Ταξιδιάνα ψυχή κι αν θέλω δίπλα σου είναι δύσκολο να μένω. Καιρός να βρω τη δικιά μου ζωή. Σ' αυτό το ταξίδι δεν θα σε περιμένω.